What up, world? This is the GoalNet recording live here from the greater Chicago area. As you can tell, new surroundings. For many of you that follow my Instagram account, you might know that I moved around Christmas time, so still getting settled in the new setup, and that's been a bit of the delay with some of the content, aside from just ensuring that get enough ice time to put everything through its paces. So what's new about today's review is we're going to try something new. This will end up on the YouTube channel, so it's very easily to find in the future. But we're also going to try and throw this on Instagram TV and see if that makes it more convenient for people to tune in. And as this is 2020, it's a new year. We got some new surroundings. We're also going to rename the reviews Fireside Chats with TGN. So the first fireside chat we're going to have is a review on the Brian's Optik 2. Now, please note this is a heavily modified set of pads. I like to call them TGN Spec. And if you're curious what all the mods are, check out the deep dive video that is on YouTube. Today's video is solely going to be focused on the review, and I will explain how I felt the gear performed and how I feel the pad has evolved compared to the original Optik 1 setup. So first things first, we will start with the pads. So one of the things that's new with the Optik 2 line, and I took advantage of with the TGN Spec, is the Max Core. So what the Max Core is it's designed to be a pad that's going to be a little bit more rigid, but it's also going to hold up a lot more over the course of the life of the pad, so it should feel stiffer longer. Versus being a pad that kind of starts off pretty rigid and then softens up quite a bit. One thing that this pad is not, though, is overly stiff, kind of going from ankle up to the top of the pad. So it's very rigid torsionally, so that's talking about twist across the face of the pad. But in the grand schemes of how stiff a pad could be, I would say this falls between medium and stiff, kind of like 3/4 stiff, if that makes any sense. And that's just, again, kind of talking about the overall integrity of the core. But it definitely is a stiffer pad than the Flex or a stiffer pad than the Fly. And so I do commend Brian's with coming up with a stiffer core. So what I found with that is that this pad feels a bit boxier in a good way, because that's what they're trying to do. So whenever we drop down, this pad is going to be nice and stable and seal very, very well along the ice. And you're not going to only say rigid. You can see the thigh rise here doesn't bend in too much. That's a really good way to kind of test how much torsional flex this pad has. So this is a really good pad in terms of kind of playing boxy, but as I mentioned, it's still pretty flexible. Pad gives it the thigh, gives it the knee, and then it's got a nice soft boot on it. So really good design in terms of it has flex when you need it and where you want it. The carryover is the Opti slide. So Brian's is definitely in the running for potentially having the fastest sliding pad. I don't know if they are the fastest per se, but you're definitely not losing ground really using Opti slide. And one of the great things about Opti slide is that it really is consistent ice surface to ice surface. So that's really great. If you play in the summer, maybe your rink's humid, you stick a little bit. You play in a rink where the ice gets really choppy really quickly, bad zamp guy. This stays really consistent. Some of the other sliding surfaces on the market, they can tend to change how effective they are based on the ice conditions. Also really nice here, got the laced in knee guard, the big huge leveler in the back of the knee stack as well. This is one of my custom specs. I strongly recommend this to anybody ordering pads. This is extra foam inside the landing area, so it gives you a lot of extra cushion. So unless you're playing in any sort of heavily regulated league like the NHL, where I'm not exactly sure if this knee thickness is actually complying or not anymore, I would definitely grab this. This is just going to do nothing but protect your body from your body weight over time. The strapping's also been revised as well. So this is one of the areas on the pad that I would say I'm 50-50 on. It's definitely streamlined and way easier to put them on in the locker room. And because there's limited Velcro, it's way easier to kind of consistently strap your pads in the same manner time over time. So it's great because I think with a lot of the pads out there, sometimes when there's too much Velcro, excuse me, makes it almost too hard to consistently strap the pads exactly the same time over time, which was always the beauty of the leather straps, right? You knew the fourth hole, the fifth hole, the second hole, whatever it was. With elastic, I think you strap it a little bit differently every time. So this is a great system for that regard. The one thing I don't like though, is that with, the more Gen Pro here and less Velcro, is that you have less options for how to do your straps. So I'm actually somebody kind of weird, I think, but I normally actually do, when I do the knee down, I put a little bit more vertically. It just seems to sit really nicely on my leg. But that isn't an option. So again, the strapping isn't bad. It's not necessarily a step backwards, but with every design, there's kind of trade-offs. So Brian's cleaned up the strapping to make it more consistent. The downside of that is that you have less options compared to some of the older iterations of the pads. So one of the other things, which is a TGN spec here, is I ordered the Professor strap a couple different ways because I'd always had a Professor style strap on the TGN spec, but the stock Brian's one has a big, thick pad there with some Nash on the inside, very similar to how a lot of other companies do in the RRC. To me, I just find that that's a little bit too much bulk. I have a strap coming across down there. I have a strap coming across here, and then I have a big, thick padded strip there. It seems a little bit overkill to me, so I love the Professor strap, but I do like the simplicity of just having the single nylon strap here. And I wear knee pads underneath, and I'd say this sits on top of the knee elastic Velcro anyway, so it's not really interfering, and you're not really getting a pull or a pinch. I don't wear this strap overly tight. The way I like to wear this is I wear my elastic pretty firm, and then I have this on, but a tad looser. And if you ever get in one of those positions, which is the one trade-off of elastic, is sometimes the pad can just stretch and give a little bit. This is almost like a parachute, and it just catches your leg from sliding off the knee block or anything like that. So it is a really great extra feature, doesn't add too much weight, and is something you don't really notice. One other suggestion I would have ordering it is I wear big knee pads, and I wear them externally to like socks. I don't wear them under socks. And I found, actually, as I mentioned, I ordered this a couple different ways. I found that the stock Professor strap is a little bit too short. So I ordered some longer ones as well. So I found that the longer style, just nylon strap without the padded strap worked the best for me. If you're interested in doing that, just ask for the goalie crease, tell them you want the TGN style strapping, and they can definitely hook you up with that. So just to recap, this pad definitely delivered for the Max Core being stiffer torsionally and giving it more of that boxy feel, that boxy seal. I could edit that, but I'm sure you're all laughing, so let's just enjoy it. But we still get good flex at the boot, flex in the thigh rise if you need it. So overall, this is a really great concept of a pad. The Opti slide works. I think the only other thing for me I'd love to see Brian's continue with in the future, hopefully as Optik 3 comes out, is I'd love to see even harder rebounds off the face of this pad. So these are definitely harder than Optik 1. So to reiterate, if you were somebody that had a Fly core in Optik 1, didn't find it stiff enough, or you want harder rebound pads, this is definitely a good step up for you. However, the more and more I test different gear, I find the one feature that really makes or breaks pads for me generally are the sliding ability, the strapping, and the rebounds. And I would definitely love to see Brian's continue to get their rebounds harder and harder. Again, this is better than Optik 1, but I definitely think that that's something they could look to improve on as they think about, evolving future lines of their gear as well. And one thing too, If anybody read my article previewing the 2020 gear coming out this year, is now that we've seen a lot of the gear coming out, Optik came out in 2018 and we're looking at 2020 here with Optik 2 and some of the other new lines. I feel like Optik was actually really ahead of its time. It was really exciting being that it was kind of a new moniker from Brian's not being called Sub-Zero anymore. But it didn't quite look different. And I think after Odin came out, everybody expected the pad to look completely different. And this still had cut and sewn graphics and things like that, where people would have unrealistic expectations. And now that we've seen a lot of the other pads come out in the market, they've definitely going to this style pad. So now that we can kind of rewind the clock and everything, I give Brian's a ton of kudos for really, I think, having one of the first modern cut and sew pads that's really kind of this new definition of a pad, which is, pretty stiff at the knee, the thigh rise, very flexible to boot, extremely thin profile, designed to be hard rebounds and designed to be fast sliding. And that's a trend that everybody in the industry is going to with it. And again, if you look at a lot of the newer pads that are still built traditionally with the cut and sew assembly method here, they often look a lot like Optik if we think about some of the new pads coming out in the market. So that's some overdue kudos as well for Brian's. Next up, we will move on to the blocker. So the blocker is the piece of equipment, I mentioned this a little bit in my deep dive, but Brian's was most transparent with, I think this was the piece of gear they wanted to change most in the line of the Optik, going from Optik 1 to Optik 2. And as I said a couple moments ago, in hindsight, Optik 1 was killer, and maybe I didn't fully appreciate it in the moment. So with the blocker, the main improvement they tried to do was to stiffen the sidewall. And if we compare this to Optik 1, unfortunately I don't have side by side, it is absolutely a more rigid design. However, in the grand scheme of how rigid a blocker sidewall could be, I would still love to see Brian's continue to iterate off this and improve it in future generations of Optik. So if we want to know, is it better than Optik 1? Absolutely it is. But I'd still love to see a little bit more stiffness here in the sidewall of the blocker. But again, it's a big step forward and it's great to see Brian's improve. And one of the huge improvements they had for adjustability is we still have our BOA, but borrowing this, I believe debuted on the Genetic 4, way easier to get in there and do it. One of the things that Brian's does incredibly well, and if you've been watching any of my in locker room stories lately, you'll notice I'm wearing the glove and the blocker in games and wearing this full time. Just the fit and feel on this blocker is phenomenal. It's extremely comfortable on your hand. Some of this might be a little subjective where like the blocker palm's just the right size for me, but it just really feels comfortable in my hand, and I love a blocker to be snug. And absolutely, this is an option I've messed around with Brian's year over year, but something Craig Anderson initially asked for, and it's more padding between the back of the blocker board and the inside of the hand glove. And I think Anderson had 1 layer. I did 2 previously, I did 3. 3 is dialed in, so this blocker is super comfortable, sits in front of my hand, and really doesn't feel like I'm wearing much. I also add Lexan to this, because as I mentioned before, with the pads, I love hard rebounds, and Lexan really does add a little bit of extra zip. The reason that that's not standard is because it does add some weight to the blocker, so that's something you need to think about. As I've done TGN and reviewed more and more gear, there's certain thresholds where as long as it's kind of in that ballpark of weight, I don't notice it, but if it feels over a certain weight, it's heavy. This does, like just on the scale, you may have noticed my deep dive video sounds a little bit heavy. That's my own fault, if you will, for adding the Lexan, but I can truly say in using it, blocker doesn't feel heavy. I don't feel like I'm getting beat blocker side or anything because it's too slow, too heavy, not fatigued at the end of the game. So I'm still a firm believer when I order Brian's gear, I'm definitely going to stick with the Lexan. One thing I noticed with Optik 2 that I don't know if it's by design, and I'm not quite sure if it's because I have my Lexan, but if we look at the overall profile of this board, it's a little bit flatter than what I remember my Genetic 4, probably came up a bit more like that. So that's one thing to consider as well. If that was stock with this model of pads, I would say it's Brian's working harder to make sure that we have a lot of differentiation between the genetic and the Optik line and giving consumers as many different choices as possible. So to recap the blocker, the highest point is just the overall comfort. This thing feels awesome on your hand. With the Lexan in it, really was happy with the rebounds. Looks like my production assistant came to help out. And so the comfort is really high. Just the overall fit and finish of the blocker is great. Really clean look without any of stitching. The only thing I'd really, again, love to see Brian's to continue to work on with this line is just stiffening that sidewall. Haven't gotten any stingers or pucks through there to the point where they've hurt, but it's just something that when I look at the blocker and I think about what would I ask Brian's to improve next time along, it's definitely to continue to work on this sidewall. But again, when comparing this to Optik 1, this is definitely a step forward for Brian, so that is always good to hear that a great product is getting better. Last up is the... So here we are, the last part of the review. Also, in addition with the Fireside chat, trying to keep everything under 20 minutes, so it's very easy to watch and digest. So hopefully people appreciate the format and I'm not missing too much. If you do feel like these new reviews are too abbreviated, let me know. I'm going to fire a couple off in this new format. We can look forward to EF4 coming in the next day or two. Back onto the glove. This is by far and away the best piece of the line for me, and it is the best glove I have ever used. This is always the tough part about Brian's, is it's so much fun to pretend I'm a gear designer and think about all the stuff that I want to tweak and change and try. But it also makes it a little bit tough to review because I didn't use the stock stuff, so it's a little bit tough to tell you if the TGN spec is perfect or this overall glove kicks ass or both. So that's the toughest thing, but I'll try and articulate here what are some of the things I love about the glove. So obviously it's the BOA. That's just really comfortable, really easy to use, really locks your wrist in. And the great things Brian's does is that when the BOA tightens, the wrist is a floating cuff design. So you can have your wrist snug and then you still have all the range of motion in the world. A lot of times when people do wrist strap, even if there's a piece here, the BOA dial wraps around, you actually have strapping going through the cuff. So the tighter you wear your glove, the more it forces it into the, the hard foam here. And that actually limits your range of motion. So Brian's design here is flawless. Second thing I really love about this glove, and hopefully this comes through in the video, but this is a very deep glove. It's the overall shape of it. So when it opens up, this thing is huge, nice and square, but it's also really deep. So I find that when I want to grab the puck or the stick for puck handling, it works really well because the glove the shaft of the stick just pops right into the heel of the glove here in this little shape, and you can see how long the fingers are. So I wouldn't, BS anybody and say I catch every puck perfectly cleanly, but with how deep the fingers and the shapes are here, any of the pucks I catch, I find they funnel into the pocket really, really well. And because the glove opens really wide and it presents big, and then the pucks are funneling in here, and even if you don't catch it cleanly because there's this great finger shape, I find I'm really able to close this glove really effectively and have like no pop outs, and it's a very natural break angle. This is a custom brake. If you want to order this, just request the TGN spec brake. It is Brian's version of a 90-degree brake. However, it isn't perfectly a 90-degree brake. I know I had a couple retailers asking me about this, had people watching my video for the deep dive and wanting to know about ordering it. So just ask for the TGN spec, and I can assure you that the team up at the goalie crease can get this for you. Just ask for Rance. So again, super deep glove. This is the anchor tee with a skate lace as well. So when you catch, this pocket is just super, it's deep, which is phenomenal, but it's also very soft and flexible. So super easy that when the puck's in there, the puck is retained as well. When you close it, nice, you can see very point at the tip of the glove and just seals phenomenally. And for anybody wondering, I always get a game ready brake glove as well. And I still think by a pretty good margin. Everybody's game ready gloves are getting better and better, but Brian's definitely has, to me, the best off the shelf stock game ready glove. So if it's not clear, love this glove. Really don't have any negatives. As we're sitting here filming the video, I can't think of any real room for improvement. And I love this glove so much that I could definitely see, even as I test other pieces of 2020 gear throughout the year, there's a real high probability that you could definitely see me still wearing this glove game in and game out, because I'm just so comfortable with it. I catch with it so well. And I feel like it really is well. Not a great puck handler, I wish I were, but I do appreciate how quickly the stick locks into this glove with that deep heel. So to reiterate, Optik 1 was a great pad. I think it really set a new definition for what a lot of the cut and sew pads are going to be. And Optik 2 is definitely a step forward, and Brian's is in the great and healthy position where Optik 1 was a great pad. They didn't have to reinvent the wheel. They just had to have a real honest look on what did we do great last time, listen to the pro goalies, listen to the market, figure out a couple things that they could have improved on, i.e. making a stiffer core for the pads, making a stiffer sidewall for the blocker, and tweaking the game ready brake, where the last one kind of had the dual hinge and this one is laced in like the Genetic Force, so it stays more consistent throughout the life of the glove. And they took a really good winning formula and made it even better. It'd almost be like, using an analogy of writing a paper, their first draft was Optik 1, and they were probably working with a B+, A- with a little bit of revision and a little bit of guidance on how to tweak the formula. This recipe is definitely an A, so can't wait for Optik 3. We're getting years away at that point, but just really enjoy what Brian's has done with this set of gear, and also can see a couple areas for some minor improvement to really take this stuff next level. So if you have any questions, throw them down in the comments or head over to thegoalnet.com. This is the GoalNet signing out.